What is an industry secret that you know? Story 1. Theater seats aren't all the same size. Some are narrower than others. We use a variety to manipulate the sawtooth arrangement so that you look through a gap between heads, not straight into the head of the person in front of you. That means some seats are better, i.e. wider than others. Then, Story 2. The stuff that makes movie theater popcorn taste like movie theater popcorn is called flavacol. It's a salt-like additive that you can buy yourself and add to your popcorn at home. A carton lasts forever because you only need like a teaspoon of flavacol per cup of kernels, and it's indistinguishable from the popcorn you get at the movies. Story 3. The military typically disposes of old vehicles by parking it somewhere on a large base and abandoning it. Sometimes they use them as training targets. It's cool, but eerie to see. I know where there's a lake that's full of Sherman tanks. They drove them out there in the late 50s in the winter and left them to fall through. Story 4. I worked for FedEx Trade Networks clearing customs shipments, and almost anyone buying anything over $800 or stuff from China and a few select other countries have to provide what's called a 5106. A 5106 is a form the US government uses for duties and tax purposes and shit, but on the form you need to provide a social security or EIN number. We started working remote in 2021, and on my work computer from inside my house with nobody being able to ever know I had access to hundreds of social security numbers, addresses, names, and everything to easily steal identities. That's not even the kicker. This is an entry-level position and anyone can work it and have access to this shit. If you import personally from overseas and need to provide a 5106, you're better off getting a LLC to avoid the very high possibility that some dipshit FedEx hired doesn't snap a photo of your 5106 form from his phone. Story 5. In corporate culture, the IT staff can be your best resource or your biggest enemy. They deal with idiots all day, so say hello and treat them nicely. Not only when you have a problem, bring them some donuts or something randomly. They don't forget and will take care of you next time you have a computer crisis. I've gotten new monitors, extra keyboards for home, cords, whatever I needed, because I took some time to say hi and ask how their day was going. Same with the maintenance facilities team. They are two teams you want on your side. Story 6. Your massage therapist doesn't care about your size or your body hair, but they appreciate when you've showered within a few days of your appointment and have brushed your teeth. They aren't judging you for the things you feel self-conscious about, but they are judging you if you are an entitled asshole. Saying things like, "My wife would not be happy if she knew how hot you were," although it may seem to you like a harmless compliment, is creepy and will get you on the do not schedule list. That one shouldn't be a secret, but apparently, there are men who are oblivious to this. Story 7. Medical equipment manufacturers jack up the prices of everything in the US because they can. You can go to, say, India, buy something like a CAT scan machine, ship it to the US Express Air, and it will still be cheaper than buying it in the US. Or, you know the little BP carts? The batteries in there are the same as game feeder batteries sold at Tractor Supply. You can buy cases of those batteries from TSC for the price of one from the company that makes the BP cart. Story 8. Food expiration dates, especially on shelf-stable foods, are essentially arbitrary. Nutrition labels are often wildly inaccurate. It is technically not legal to use false information, but it's very, very rare to be caught unless you are making health-related claims. Those food certifications that you see on food labels are provided by for-profit companies that bill you monthly, so they are highly incentivized to certify as many companies as they can and actively ignore violations. A shocking number of ingredients that are illegal or heavily regulated in other devolved countries are perfectly legal and mostly unregulated in the US. The same companies that make store brands at higher-end stores like Wegmans, Whole Foods, and Trader Joe's make them for cheaper stores like Walmart and Aldi. I could go on. Story 9. A lot of the private blood tests actually take longer to process than the NHS, public free, blood tests, because most of the private healthcare providers haven't bought into the widely used digital system that's used. Instead, they have to be processed manually, which means going through the extra step of getting the main lab to code them. Staff who process manuals also need more training due to the wide variety of forms used and the stupid goddamn shitty handwriting we have to put up with. So there's fewer staff who are trained to process them, and they tend to sit there unprocessed for longer than the easier electronic blood samples. Story 10. Right now, Mass transit agencies in most cities are dealing with massive shortages of drivers, mechanics, and many other administrative positions. The drivers are working 70-plus hours every week just to keep the system going. Drivers need a CDL-BW/P endorsement. Therefore, there is nothing illegal about working a driver 17 hours a day. Therefore, transit agencies are forcing drivers, per union contract in most cases, using inverse seniority, to work constantly. It's a huge safety risk, but no one seems to care about that. Story 11. Just last night we were playing a gig, and my guitarist said he was going to show us a little trick he uses to get everyone on the dance floor. Over the mic, he asked everyone to come up in front of the stage so we could get a group picture of everyone who came to the show. As soon as he got the pic, we started playing and everyone stayed on the floor until the end of the set. It was a great. Story 12. I'm repair tech at Chuck E. Cheese. There are some games we can adjust the payout for, and some we can't. We have a number called ticket per play, or ticket per tap, that we have to try to maintain. Every game and ride is adjusted somehow, so we can get to that average number. The length of the ride is so you will tap your card more or less times. Some games have fixed ticket payout we can't adjust, so we adjust other games up or down to get the whole average to that magical number. If one game we can't change pays out 4 tickets on average, and the number we want to reach is 6. For instance, I would adjust another game that can be adjusted to 7 or 8 to compensate, because the boss only cares about the average payout on a whole, not on the individual games, unless it's insanely high or low. If a game is cheating you out of tickets, we probably did that on purpose to compensate for something else. This also goes for the claw machine. We can control how often it pays out. Tickets can be bought at 1 penny per ticket. If you drop a quarter into a token machine, if it doesn't pay you 25 tickets, you're better off just buying tickets. No, we don't reuse pizza. It's cheaper and easier to just make another one since we get the ingredients in bulk. It's just that we cut into smaller slices, so it's harder to do right. Plus, the kitchen personnel usually doesn't care about making it look perfect. No, the job isn't fun. My job is to make sure you have fun. My job is stressful. I'll answer any questions people have. Story 13. This may be a bit outdated, but I'm sure it still applies in some areas. Companies that handle credit card payments might still be storing unencrypted credit card data, including CVV numbers, even if the payments are being handled by a third party. This has been illegal in Europe for a few years, but many companies were still doing it at least up until 2 years ago. In these cases, I can't even begin to explain how easy it is for any employee to access this data. A more current comment: budget airlines make money out of people's scatterbrainedness. Many times, if your case bag doesn't exactly fit the measures, this goes for height, width, and depth, you could be charged up $70 or more. Please read the conditions. Story 14. 90% of people can't tell the difference between good and good enough. The Pareto principle generally holds true. 80% of the work is done by 20% of the people, but being one of those producers does not necessarily pay. It can even hurt your career. Digital design for hire often ends up being about first capturing what the client wants to see, and then shoehorning their questionable tastes into some version that tries to follow design principles. More than half the people that practice any given skill set, by definition, are not good at it. Your chances of getting any professional that is actually good at what they do is about 1 in 4. Far more is determined by others' perception of you than your skills. Ideas are worthless. Value is 100% execution. Story 15. A few. Logistics, food supply. A lot of produce is around a year old by the time it gets to you. Potatoes, apples, any root vegetable, really. They get picked and put into giant refrigerated sheds and have trucks pick them up on a regular basis to go to distributors or processors. Finance. There is a small contingent of very smart but also psychopathic people who know what they're doing in the market. A large portion of the rest of the commercial side is made up by people who simply understand the trends of order flow and edge. They know someone is offering for this much, and someone wants to pay that much, and they're middle-manning it with software or on the phone. And the third side is made up of nepotism hires and white bread nerds who just answer the phone and plug in numbers at big banks. Recruiting. Recruiters, headhunters legitimately want to get you a job because that's the only way they get paid. Companies are shit and don't give a fuck about you. Recruiters are constantly calling them multiple times, /following up, asking for feedback, /trying to schedule you for the next round, etc. They are on your side and trying to get you hired because it makes them money, and in some part of their heart they actually give a shit about you. Story 16. In the visual effects industry, everybody learns on bootleg software of some sort. That is why those $2,600 list prices don't surprise anyone. I even had a high-level employee of one of the companies that make it yell at me once, "We don't care about some lone kid using it. We want to nail the companies pirating it." He was upset because I had heard through an industry grapevine that a big post house had been caught with bootleg software. Story 17. Your heat is very unlikely to get shut off in the winter, regardless of payment. The utility company is very busy, and they only have the time to sometimes shut off only the top non-paying customers. That's unlikely to be you. Alternatively, just tell the company you moved. The bill is now in nobody's name. Same rules apply. If you end up getting a note on your door saying a shutoff will happen with nobody claiming the bill, just say you moved back in and want to pay again starting on that date. Story 18. Water coming from wastewater treatment plants is cleaner than the river water it's going into. The main problem is not enough dissolved oxygen. That's seriously the biggest danger. Meanwhile, the worst pollution for most rivers is runoff causing high biochemical oxygen demand, BOD, aka too much food for bacteria that also consume O2. So just like the danger from the wastewater treatment plant, fish suffocate. All the random stuff from metal finishers is stopped before it's allowed into the sewer system. If the system is working correctly. Story 19. I work in a high school as a science teacher. There's a lot of industry secrets, but since schools are publicly funded, I'm not sure how secret it all truthfully is, LOL. I guess I'll try to share what I know though. In a lot of states, a school's funding is tied to its graduation rates. So what do you think a school is going to do to ensure they don't lose funding? Inflate graduation rates. If a student can bullshit their way through to senior year, the school will do anything to make sure they pass. Excuse assignments, excuse absences, encourage teachers to change a student's grade, etc. It's disingenuous and destroys the value of a high school degree. We already inflate grades and give kids too much grace as is. But with seniors, it's so much worse. This is hands down the worst legislative move affecting public education currently. There are still a lot of good kids. I know that sounds like it goes against my first point a little bit, but it's true. If you look at teacher talk or follow a teacher on Facebook, you'd think the next generation is going to cause the downfall of man. Not true. I teach a bunch of wonderful students. I have students with 10x the drive and 10x the natural smarts I did as a child. But talking about the brilliant, well-behaved kids doesn't get reactions on social media. Don't fall into the habit of doom scrolling and thinking every kid is bad. I have so many kids who don't fit the mold those posts create. These kids are much more accepting than the kids I was with in high school. Don't get me wrong, kids still bully and gossip and whatnot, but they truthfully are less racist and less homophobic and less bigoted a lot of the time. My high school had a gender sexuality alliance club, but the posters would get ripped off the walls. It's just not like that anymore. The kids can still be dicks and form their little cliques, but they are generally more accepting. You can see the baby steps of acceptance starting to take hold with these kids. Parents' game. The system that is accommodations. I have had parents tell me to my face they take their kids to the doctors and schedule appointments with the guidance counselors so they can get their kid labeled with any disability/disorder/shortcoming possible. Not even because they think their kid actually has any issues. They just want their kid to have extra time on standardized tests. As a teacher, it sucks to sit in on a meeting. It's legally required to have a teacher in the meeting and just listen to why this straight-A kid needs 1.5 time to take the SAT, and the parent has a smug look on their face the whole time. Accommodations are handed out like candy. Most adults who enter this field are shocked that 50% of their kids have some sort of accommodation. If every kid has an accommodation, it takes away from the resources needed for the students who actually struggle in the classroom. Teachers are people too. You have adult friends who party all the time? Adult friends going through breakups, divorces, adultery? Adult friends who haven't grown up all that much? For some reason, a lot of people thinks this doesn't apply to teachers. It, absolutely does, LOL. This isn't true of everyone, but some people think teachers are all vanilla rule-following folk. I tell people I'm a teacher, and then they're shocked to hear I like drinking beer, going to live sporting events, and going to concerts. Like, I'm only a teacher 40 hours a week. I'm me every hour outside of that. And the same is true for my coworkers. I don't sleep at the school, LOL. Story 20. A lot of wine in the US is made by a large producer and sold to small wineries only for the winery to label and bottle it with their name on it. The other thing you'll see a lot of is one producer-grower providing juice to wineries, which they will then ferment and bottle. #2 isn't super surprising for most PPL, or really a big deal in my mind since the winery is still making the wine. But #1 makes a question some things. Story 21. The fees that everyone understandably hate on concert tickets in the US are partially caused by the artists themselves in many cases. Ticket prices have to reflect a profit for both the venue and the artist. But artists' images depend more on being connected to the fans. Where they have the clout to do so, or where their promoters have the clout to do so, they will push the venue to advertise base ticket prices that do not take venue profit into consideration, which then gets added as a fee. The artist then gets credit for the lower base ticket price, while the venue gets blame for the fees. Artists in many cases don't actually like all-in pricing, upfront acknowledgement of the total ticket price, fees, etc. This has all been exacerbated by trends in rising touring costs and likely reduced interest in drinking among 35. That's not to defend the practice, which Live Nation and some others still push to the extreme. Story 22. Veterinarian here. Most or all of your pet supplements you buy online or in stores are just snake oil. The anti-anxiety supplements, the special diets, the vitamins, and yes, even the CBD supplements. It's all bullshit. All of it. So many fly-by-night companies with huge marketing budgets and zero accountability. So many marketing ploys, so many advertisements. Also, your fancy schmancy boutique food manufacturers who have no business history and are gone within a few years. More expensive food does not equal higher quality. Dogs need grain. Don't feed grain-free. Feeding a grain-free diet means the grains are replaced by legumes. Legumes block the amino acid needed to have a healthy heart. Dogs who are on GF diets that develop heart disease and get switched back to a normal diet have their heart problems reduced or resolved. Many food companies claim to be supervised by a veterinary nutritionist. You should know that there are only 14 veterinary nutritionists in the entire US. Feeding raw food diets will land your pet in the hospital with me for several days from hemorrhagic gastroenteritis, secondary from salmonella or listeria food poisoning. Raw diets are not appropriate for any breed or condition. Your dog is nothing like a fucking wolf. Your dog is not sad to be fed the same diet every day. It's just a marketing ploy. Food bags have a feeding guideline on the back. This is the caloric requirement for an intact working male dog, max calorie needs. This is to sell more dog food. If you are going to feed by the back of the bag, reduce that number by 25%. Otherwise, you will be sprinting towards obesity. No, I am not paid by the major manufacturers, Purina, Hills, etc. Nor was my education funded by them, nor do I have any interactions with their representatives. I have no incentives to recommend the major brands and manufacturers. I recommend them because they are tried and true, employ nutritionists, perform research, even though it's usually biased, and have a reputation to uphold. Story 23. If you're using in-house staff and equipment, there's quite often a markup on costs of 100 to 500% on the rental fees for certain equipment. They will charge you 2x the freelance day rate for each technician you have on site throughout the day, even if they're only staff, and will have rules about you need certain types of technician even when you don't. Most commonly, this is a lighting or AV technician in smaller rooms, where the AV is plug-and-play HDMI switcher and a projector on a remote and the lights are on a fader. Even when the venue heavy discounts with their suppliers, they'll mark up the base cost from their suppliers and use that. If you decide to bring your own crew or production equipment into the venue to avoid the above fuckskery, they'll mess you around in other ways. E.g., you'll need to pay for power and internet at an insane markup. E.g., you'll end up paying something like £1,200 for 163.3 PowerPoint per day. So if you need several around one large venue that mounts up, or for internet, they'll charge you something like £200 per day for a single 2 MB line. Once saw the quote for an esports event, and they were being charged £1,500, $2,000 per day, per 20 MB line, and they needed 10. Catering, you're looking about £5 per low-quality sandwich and about the same for a single bottle of water for your audience, with no option for running water and rule on no one bringing in their own.